or if you have to pay more, how quickly you're told you have to pay more. No, it happens because again it is digital, you know, and we are able to take programs which used to be done in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, today has become hundreds of millions. That when we are able to, because the moment you have a digital database, you are able to identify who is eligible for health care, who is eligible for housing support, who is eligible for a loan, you are able to, who is eligible for free food. So what happens then, you are able to massively scale it up. When you look at our programs, we are today talking 800 million, 500 million, 400 million. These are today the scale of programs, and it even affects behavior. You know, we have we give today unsecured loans now. I think if any of you had ever tried to get a loan, say 10 years ago, you know how challenging it is from a bank. But today, the number of loans which are given to people really run in the hundreds of millions, and they're given for self-employed people, for people who work from homes, for street vendors. And the interesting thing is, because it is digital, they also, their behavior adjusts to it. That if you look at the repayment, we have a scheme called Swanidhi. Swanidhi is, this was done during COVID, because one of the people who are very badly hit at that time, they were this informal economy. So the street vendors, the shopkeeper, the small shopkeepers, when you give them loans today, repayment rate is 90%, and there's no security. Yet, because it is digital, they also feel today much more connected, and therefore much more conscientious about what they are doing. So the picture which I want to share to all of you, as someone who's coming fresh from India, is that today there is a great deal of I would say confidence and enthusiasm uh, uh, in sort of in society, that a lot of people feel that if they look at the last 5 years, definitely last 10 years, their lives have changed in very very clearly definable ways. And they also understand in many ways today that it has actually lifted the entire country up, and it has given us actually a much higher bigger ambitions, a stronger sense of being able to get things done. But any country finally needs inspiration, and often our inspiration are our own achievements. That I spoke to you about COVID. I think a lot of people took pride. So people went about asking each other, "Acha, आपने कौन सा vaccine लिया?" Huh? So I think I was because I was of that age group where I got mine early. So actually people asked you, so and that pride of taking a made in India vaccine or an invented in India vaccine was very, very strong. The same thing I saw when we had the Chandrayaan landing. When uh, I had actually a double privilege. Sometimes there's some perks to being foreign minister. Huh? You are at the right moment with Modi ji to witness the right thing. So the first was the day actually Chandrayaan, the landing. We were in South Africa. So there was this BRICS meeting going on, and everybody knew the moon landing was coming. And when I went there, I thought, okay, naturally, as an Indian, our minds were on it. I didn't realize actually how much it would, how much the rest of the world would be looking at it. And at in fact, at one stage, Prime Minister had stepped out, and I was sitting in his place. I just happened, you are sitting. It was not my turn to talk. I happened to be looking little bit above, like this, to the top of the room. And the South African president told me, he said, "Minister, landing is not yet. You don't have to look up." So, but that feeling was there with people. Then the landing took place, and that evening there was a BRICS dinner, and there were about 40, because they'd invited a lot of other countries, most African presidents, prime ministers, many Arabs, many Asians, Latin Americans. Must have been about 40, 45. And when Prime Minister walked in, I mean, it was like, and it was absolutely spontaneous. I mean, nobody, the moment he walked in, the entire that gathering of 45, 50 prime ministers, presidents, the foreign ministers, the officials, it was like a standing ovation. And the again, what our host at that time said was, the landing may be yours, but the sense of achievement is with all of us. And that feeling today, that and I could see then it again, as I said, I got a double experience here. We finished the trip, we went to Greece, and then Prime Minister decided that he must go and thank the scientists. So we actually now you can see, I'm used to these red eye flights, so how to stay fresh after landing. So we actually took the flight, landed in Bangalore, and he went from there to ISRO headquarters. And it was the core that I think maybe the 500, 700 people who were involved in the mission were all gathered out there. And actually, in many ways, it was amazing that when you looked at these people, how actually, in a way, normal they were. I mean, they had done something fantastic. Hmm? And yet they sort of carried themselves so naturally, and it gave you a really that feeling today, that uh, what we are capable of, and that is today displaying itself in domain after domain. Again, I'm here not only in digital land, but also a land where, which was famous for telecom. Now, we did our 2G, 3G, 4G with, with collaborations. But look at 5G. We have actually, today, we are deploying our own 5G stack. And we feel today that it's actually been an enormous technology barrier, which India has successfully crossed. So it could be moon, it could be health, it could be telecom, it could be sports. That again, it's that sense of we can do it. I mean, why is it today that suddenly our sports performance has increased? I mean, one reason, yes, it is true. Government today gives much more attention and much more support to our sports person than they've ever had. But the fact is also that there is a strong degree of self motivation today in our country. That self belief, that confidence that we have gone through tough times, we have made big changes in our lives, and that we can sort of aspire to bigger things. And as I said, once you do that, its impact I can see today in my own ministry. That somehow in the last decade, the world's been a very difficult place. That almost every year, something has gone wrong somewhere in the world. And because Indians today have made the world, for them, it's a global workplace. There is probably hardly any place where you don't have a community of some size. So when something goes wrong in the world, that sense of taking care of your community obviously immediately comes to mind. So, I can almost every year name at least one big operation that we have done. I mean, last year was two. There was Ajay in Israel and Kaveri in Sudan. Year before we had Ganga in Ukraine. So, working backwards, we had Nepal earthquake, Maitri. We had Yemen. We had Operation Rahad. So, but again, as I said, that same system today, when it is motivated, when it is purposed, uh, if you were to look at these operations, the airlines also get to work, the military, the air force gets to work, the navy gets to work, the immigration people deal with it differently, the disaster response force does its best. So suddenly you have actually different parts. This is the same system. What has changed is the leadership. What has changed is the motivation. What has changed is that self belief. That very system today, and uh, you can see today an Indian leaving the shores of India does it with a does so with a confidence which they didn't have before, and they have that confidence that you know whatever happens out there, there is a government which will look after me. And let me tell you, that's a very big feeling, because when we look at the state of the world, more and more Indians will explore global work opportunities. There will be students going abroad. There will be people, blue collar workers. There will be professionals. There will be, people whose talents will be sought by companies across the world. So we have to give them that confidence. And we have shown in 10 years today how much of a difference we've been able to make, uh, as I said, just by remotivating and repurposing that system. So I say all this to you because, now, of course, with every democratic cycle is a 5-year cycle. We are at a point where the country will make some important decisions. We are very confident that there will be very good decisions in the interest of the country. But I do want to take this opportunity to actually thank all of you, because when we look at Indian communities abroad, as again someone who's myself spent a large part of my life abroad, it's not always easy living outside your country. you know there are times it's maybe a little bit easier today, but still, you know uh, there may be pluses to it. But those who live abroad also know, that uh, there are that in many ways your hearts and minds are a large part of it is always in India. So I know, that all of you in different ways contribute to the progress of our country, that are, what is happening at home, the choices we make, the progress we make is very much in your minds. So I want today to both appreciate you as well as uh, share with you that sense of confidence. I think that we are today on the right path, with the right leadership, doing the right thing, going up in the world. 10 years ago, we were the 11th largest economy in the world. A decade later, we are the fifth. I find it embarrassing to tell others that we are going to overtake them and will be third soon. Uh, so, uh, but hopefully, when it happens, they will discover it and congratulate us. So once again, really thank you all for taking time out. And I know, often in spending time with the Indian community, many of you have questions, have concerns. So if there are some issues, I'd be happy to listen to it. If there's good advice, I'm always in the market. But if there is anything you would like me to talk about, I'll be very happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, with your permission, I would like to initiate the Q&A sessions. So, the hands are already raised. So, only suggestion, we'll reach out to you. One line about yourself, and please keep the question brief. So, from the last.
Be decisive.
Quickly.
नमस्कार सर। पहले सर मेरा नाम हस्सान है और बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया सर आपका और आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी का, आपकी विदेश नीतियों और कटस्थ प्रयासों के द्वारा आज विदेशी मंच पर भारत की प्रतिष्ठा बढ़ती जा रही है। उसके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर आपका। सर मेरा एक छोटा सा सवाल है सर कि हाउ डू यू एनविजन द फ्यूचर पॉसिबिलिटीज फॉर भारत कोरिया रिलेशंस?
Thank you. We'll take a couple of more questions. Prashant.
Honorable Minister, Ambassador Sir, all my friends from the community, my name is Beena Nair. I work for the UN Green Climate Fund, and it's really a pleasure to be here in presence of you, sir. My question is, as someone with such a distinguished diplomatic career who transitioned into politics, what inspired that shift? And how do you believe that your diplomatic experience shaped your thoughts or your approach to politics and governance? Thank you.
Okay, sir. So, third question, we'll take two more after this.
Okay. Can I say? Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to share thoughts with you. My question, I am PhD student here from Gachan University, Seoul. So I want to ask you that, do you believe that politics in India really hurting sometimes the development of India? Thank you.
That's it.
Good evening, sir, and to everyone present. Thank you for sharing insights on the confidence and the growth of India. I am Ngawang Chodin from Sikkim, India, and I currently study at the Graduate School of International Studies at Ewha Women's University. When we often talk about international relations, we often talk about technology and ministry and defense. But as a student myself, with the influx of Korean students in India and Indian students in Korea, I was curious to know about your outlook on deepening the partnership between those two countries in terms of human capital and its implications between the two countries.
Last question from that side.
Sorry, guys. Well, my name is Harsh Durgatiwari. I have a very simple question. See, most of us who all are sitting here are from the technical community. Most of them are either professors, workers, or working with a lot of Samsung, LG, and etc. big companies. My question is very simple. Already in India, we have a very nice community as the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, METI, and CDEC, which is helping our countries to have a nice developed relationship for the skilled laborers. Now, the point is, the people who are working as a professionals in outside our country, and if we want to go back our country and bring this technology to us in India, how we can do it much more easily? Where should we contact? Where should we start with? Because if we write a letter to anyone, we never get a reply. So I just want that help. So we can actually take this technology to India and make our country the best, which we are talking about. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll take these 5, then we'll do another round. So abhi thoda haath niche kariye. You'll get tired, you know. So we had three questions. Akhtar ji, आपका सवाल था on Bharat-Korea relations. There was one on human capital, because I think they're kind of related. And in a way, also about the last question, what do we do on the technical side really to do more bridge building? So let us look between our two countries. How does a relationship grow when each one has something of value to offer? जो हमारी खासियत है, इनकी है, something they have we don't have, could be on scale, could be on quality, could be in complexity. So I feel today, and I'm very pleased with the last question, because if many of you are from the technical side, you will readily appreciate this answer. Yes, we will do more business. It's natural. Okay. Of course, when we look, there is the normal politics and diplomacy. UN mein kuch hoga, there will be something in ASEAN. But to me, the real special character of this relationship is what is possible actually on the technology side. And this, as I said, today the changes in India make it much more possible for this relationship to be more productive. That we would also like our Korean partners to see that there are developments in India, there are things happening in India which also impresses them. That it's something which is more mutual, which is more balanced, which is more interesting, for them. So, and I feel it is very much possible, because today, if you look in international relations, there are two very big debates going on. And both, one came out of COVID, that supply chains, there should be more supply chains. That if all supply chains lead to one country and something happens in that country, then the entire world is at risk. So how do you build more supply chains? This is one issue. The second, on the digital side, there is a great issue today. Who do you trust on the digital side? That, all of us, our personal information or our company information or our national information, it has an extreme sensitivity. I would at least like my information to be with some company jahan kuch rule of law ho, kuch procedure ho. If nothing else, I can go to court. There is a certain safeguarding of that. So today, data privacy, data security, these have become big issues, and then countries find others whom they trust. So it's in many, it's in many ways like personal relationships. You would do things with someone you trust more than with someone you don't know or you don't trust. So I feel that, the focus of our ties, and this is certainly part of what is my messaging here, that let us find today, bigger targets which are mutually supportive for each other. That in the range of technology sides, what is it that we can do? But then the gentleman in the back asked a question, saying, I want to help. Main kahan jaun? Give me a solution. See, it depends on the domain. It would, to some extent, depend on your line of work as well. In many cases, I have myself seen people who have come back to India. And in fact, in many cases, I have met them in meetings which METI has done, or which our on the digital side, sometimes we have among ministries meetings, people who have come back, started the business, or who have linked up with other businesses, who have joined Indian businesses, because your line and where it goes. To some extent, I would say the embassy is your answer as well. That, the embassy is at least, is accessible, it is personal. If you go to an embassy, somebody will take note of it and do something. Whereas in this world, where there's so much happening, for big organizations to get cold calls or, sort of suggestions of which they don't know the background, That's not always practical for them. They may have the desire, but but to come back to what can be the human connect, I'm struck by something. I feel actually that somewhere we have yet to develop that kind of cultural closeness here. And in fact, today at one of the meetings, I told someone that I hear much more K-pop outside India than I do inside India. Okay, I like my own music. Don't get me wrong, but if often when I go to other countries, I've not seen that same exposure to penetration, or you can say, of K-pop, or even of serials. We have serials, but uh, not perhaps with the same degree of popularity, I would say. It could be the other way around as well. I see many things Indian. There are countries where I don't know how prevalent Indian food is here among local people, but there are many countries where I see it is very, very popular. It has almost become internalized for them. So working on this, and the best way of working on it is actually at a popular level. It is not something governments can do. you know the more communities grow, you make friends. So how do you familiarize people, Koreans with India and Indians with Korea? I think that is a big service that you can do. I mean, if you all live here and you have, you find good things in Korea, I think you should be sharing it with your friends and family in India, and they will get some part of it will stick, in their minds. And the same, if you one thing which Prime Minister always tells people: please take your, in this case, Korean friends, encourage them to do tourism in India. That, when we look at our tourism numbers, given what our tourism potential is, it is very much below the levels that we should be having. But I do, and I'd like to see the student community grow. In fact, today I was telling Ambassador, how do we find ways of expanding Korean language teaching in India? These are the connects. You know, because when you look at the big relationships which have changed for us, obviously as a minister, as an ambassador, as a diplomat, I would like to say I changed the relationship with America. But the reality is, it's that entire people to be, it's that bridge of people between our two countries which has actually been the game changer. So I leave that thought with you. How did you make the transition? See, in my case, I didn't make the transition. Somebody else made the transition for me. So about 5 years ago, I was at that time, actually I had retired from diplomacy, and I was a well-paid corporate executive, and the Prime Minister told me that he was keen that I join the government. So it, frankly, and to me, it was, to me personally, it was a surprise. I had not even thought about it. But one of the reasons I had not thought about it was nobody in my family, then or even now, has even remotely thought about politics. In fact, rest of my family is still wondering, what am I doing in politics? So it's not something I was prepared for at all. So then you ask me how, so did diplomacy teach you? It did, because, when you are thrown, in a completely new environment, what do? I did as a minister what I had done earlier as a diplomat or ambassador. First, I watched everybody around me. What do they do? How do they behave? What is the, what is the kind of, you can say, like the code between them? How, you learn by in a way, looking at others, picking up points, but you should have that willingness to to pick that up. It took, to be honest, it took a little effort, because even if you are even if you are an ambassador, it's very different, from, say, being with all of you, and then going out in India, dealing with, with, I would say, the public, often sometimes in very demanding circumstances, people of different backgrounds, different numbers, different situations. So, and I must say, as someone who's still new in that line of work, what it actually opened up my eyes about what politicians do, and what politics is about, what public service is about. It's a very, very demanding, very taxing thing, but there is also the satisfaction of a very different level, that you may have made decisions, or may have contributed somewhere, which has actually changed, something very big for a large, I mean, as I say, I look back at some of the big challenges of the last 5 years, you say, okay, I also had my little bit to add to it. It's also something you will remember all your life. So, one part of me, after almost 5 years now, has internalized it. One part of me is still sort of reflecting on it. But the last question, because it flows from this, this idea that does politics hurt development? It depends what kind of politics, because that same political motivation, exhortation, it can also be, in a way, a force of change. That if you ask, there is I give you an example. You remember, I think this about it would have been 7-8 years ago, one August 15th, I think it was 2015, if my memory is right. Prime Minister Modi from Red Fort on August 15th asked people who could afford to pay for the gas cylinder to give up the subsidized gas cylinder. Okay. Remember, you are actually telling people to make, in a way, some kind of economic sacrifice. The sacrifice may not be big, but now it's actually, you could say, they did it because there is a kind of respect for a political level call. And as a result, actually, literally millions of people gave up their gas cylinders and gave it up to people who were deserving. Now, again, because often we maybe partly because of previous experience, we tend to think of politics as though it's a kind of a burden or a negative force, or it takes your time, it wastes your energy. That's a kind of feeling which I think, in a way, you didn't say it, but I could sense it. Okay. I would say, and maybe 5 years ago, I would have been like you, But today I feel, look, I've seen the positive side of it. That I've seen, you say during COVID, through the COVID period, it was actually political will which kept the system going. Because remember, you had to motivate people to come to work, to people. I mean, like, we all went to hospitals, you went to COVID centers, you went to places, you are asking people to put in extra time moving oxygen, even distributing vaccines. So politics can also be, in many ways, a very powerful motivational force. That, as I said, I've in my own ministry, during many operations, particularly, I would say the two most dangerous for us were the one in Sudan and one in Ukraine. And our people actually took physical risks, And when you ask them why they did it, because I would keep cautioning them also, saying, look, don't do anything foolish, be careful, etc. But I knew that they were taking risks. Sometimes I myself made them take risks. But you took risks because people felt, "Hey, there is an expectation. How can I disappoint? I have to do this." So you actually made people go out of their comfort zone, do things which they would not have done. I mean, to me, those are what happened during the rescue operations. That where people came through firing. People actually would not have done this. I mean, you're asking people to do it like a job. So I would urge you to take a more positive view of politics. Believe me, in our country, politics is changing for the better.
So we'll have.
I think that side had a complaint.
Okay, sir. Prashant, that side. There, towards the end.
Hello, Dr. Shankar. So it's a pleasure to meet you in person. I'm Niladri. I'm a PhD student in Seoul National University here. So we develop carbon neutral technologies for America and like European countries. So I just have a question that until Indian companies build their own indigenous technology and incorporate them, how are we gonna circumvent the effect of carbon taxing in our exports? Thank you.
Next question.
नहीं, मैंने उनको एक के लिए कहा.
Prashant, yeah, this lady.
नमस्कार सर, मेरा नाम प्रीति है और मैंने पॉलिटिकल साइंस से पीएचडी किया है.
हाँ, नहीं, बोली.
सर, आजकल मैंने पॉलिटिकल साइंस से किया है, तो मैं थोड़ा पॉलिटिक्स पे क्वेश्चन पूछूंगी. आजकल इलेक्शन है इंडिया में और सब पार्टी डर्टी कमेंट्स करती है और हम सोचते हैं इससे ज्यादा खराब नहीं बोलेगी, उससे ज्यादा खराब हो जाता है. ऐसी पॉलिटिक्स में जब आपका इंटरव्यू होता है कंट्री के अंदर या कंट्री के बाहर, आपने कभी किसी के लिए बैड वर्ड या इस तरह की लैंग्वेज यूज नहीं की जो किसी को डिसरेस्पेक्ट करती हो? जैसे आपने अभी साउथ कोरिया की ही बात की, तो आपने जब रिलेशन की बात की तो आपने बात की कि 1950 में भी ये हुआ था और आज भी ये हो रहा है. तो आप जो इस तरह से हिस्ट्री को, प्रेजेंट को बिल्कुल निचोड़ करके बात करते हैं या अपनी कंट्री को जिस तरह से प्रेजेंट करते हैं, और आप जो इंटरनल जो कमेंट होते हैं नेताओं के सबके, तो आपने उन सब में खुद को कैसे बचा के रखा है? क्योंकि आपके कमेंट इस तरह के नहीं होते.
So one question from that side.
Honorable Minister mentioned during the speech that the country is going to make a very important decision soon. So is our country or the government running out some means for the Indian diaspora to participate in this important decision? Well, actually, my question is not, my actual question is not that. So thank you for giving us this wonderful and great evening today. My name is Krishna Das, and I'm a principal engineer at Samsung Engineering. I hope my question will not spoil the moment of joy and pleasure that we are having now of meeting you, sir, and having you, Honorable Minister, in this evening here in Seoul. My question pertains to the ongoing situation in Manipur. On September 26, at the Council of Foreign Relations, Honorable Minister acknowledged the involvement of foreign hands and the destabilizing impact of migrants who have come. My question is why our government at the center hasn't done enough to stop the migrants who have come if they are not from our country and they are from our neighboring countries like Myanmar or Bangladesh? And why is that the people in Manipur feel that enough effort hasn't been done from our government at the center of our mighty India to stop the ethnic conflict once and for all, instead of telling the warring groups from both sides to not shoot at the opposite side? Thank you.
Kunja, Prashant, can you give the...
Thank you. Good evening, sir, Your Excellency. Welcome to Korea. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm personally a very big fan. And firstly, before I start my question, my name is Kunjang Namgyal. I'm working and living here in Korea. Before I start my question, I'd like to congratulate you on your book, Bharat Matters. That's the first thing I'm going to go do when I go back to India next. I'm going to ask a question that's a bit lighter note than the previous question, I think. In lines with the concept of living bridges that you mentioned earlier, I think there are many cultural similarities we share. For instance, the connection between, let's say, my home state, Sikkim, and Korea is an example we can take, a small example, yet very significant. So it has led me to think, could the northeast of India potentially serve as a cultural runway, introducing maybe a fresh trend in the India-East cultural fusion? Something in the lines of Japan's Genesis program, which has successfully nurtured people-to-people connections through cultural and educational exchanges.
One last.
One last question from that side.
Thank you, sir. My name is Dr. Viren Rai. I'm principal scientist at Samsung Electronics, serving more than 12 years in Korea. So my question is, here there is no Indian school here. School means from elementary school to 12th grade. Okay, so since many years I'm asking this question. I think this is the best platform to ask this question. We are 12 now, 15,000 Indian here, and international school are really very expensive. When postdoc scientists, professor, they cannot afford. It's very expensive. Comparatively in Japan, I was in Japan, there is 2 international Indian schools.
I know.
Yeah. So, and the school is, their tuition fees is much cheaper than other international schools. So my suggestion and request is, if we open a new Indian school here, more Indian person will come. They serve here, they can stay here, and they can communicate culturally with these Korean people.
Sure.
And we can serve our country. That's all. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Let me start in a reverse order with your question, and then club the two. Talk about the Northeast as well. I can see the problem, and wherever community has reached a certain number, I can see the need actually for schools. And we have today Indian, there are a number of Indian schools which have got a track record of creating, campuses outside. What will help there? I know many of them. I certainly, the 2 schools in Japan, actually they started first in Singapore when I was there at that time. So I'll be happy to speak to them, but there are other chains as well, and some of them are very well-known, schools. And I will, what I will do is I will connect them up to ambassador. But I would also have a suggestion to the community. For anybody coming to establish a school, it's not easy. So to the extent that a set of people from the community can help them, walk them through, give them a sense where to go, help them with the actual facilities. In some cases, local governments have contributed to it. So there is that part of it also. So, but I totally appreciate, the need for that, because also, cost is one element, but the other is also, at least for some years, all of us would like our children to have some exposure to Indian schooling, because that is very important. Even if they are continuing to live in Korea, it's part of their actually attachment to their motherland. So I take that on board. Uh, on uh, on the question you asked about the Northeast, uh, look, my own sense is the potential of the Northeast is now beginning to unfold, because what was happening was, we used to talk about look east policy, act east policy, but we were not even looking east and acting east within our own country. And if you look at how difficult it was to travel, if you see the sort of the level of business, the attention given, the resources given, it was actually very disturbing. And that actually has been one of the changes of the last 10 years. And I mean, which is why actually what our colleague mentioned about Manipur is so disturbing, which is, having taken, put in this much effort, having seen how much really the states of Northeast India have changed in the last decade. I think there is obviously everybody today, is I mean, distressed is a very mild word at what is happening in Manipur. So I do feel that, in many respects, Northeast itself can act as a bridge, but it has both a cultural side to it, but it also has a physical contiguity side to it. So today, our relations with Bangladesh, for example, have changed tremendously. Okay, so you see, railways, road, trains, waterways, goods are going to Bangladesh ports, electricity is being supplied. So it has given that whole area sort of, I would say, a kind of a boost. Now, we are also trying to see if in a similar way we can benefit from Bhutan, that by connecting Bhutan more closely. And I was talking again about I was briefing our Korean colleagues about some semiconductor decisions we made. So last week, cabinet had approved three projects. One was a fab, which will come up in Dholera, but in Gujarat. But one is a fab which is coming up in Assam. Now, to me, to see a major production, that too high technology production project coming up in the Northeast is a big statement. It actually says that, this is something which we take very much to heart. So the problem which our colleague raised, in terms of how do you safeguard our borders. See, one of our issues has also been that we have had open borders with Myanmar. That in fact we have a system. We had a very unique system where you can travel 16 kilometers either way. It used to be much more before, without actually travel documents. So we have, unfortunately, after all these tragic events, we have decided now that to suspend that provision, and actually to in a way, I would say, harden the border situation. It is unfortunate, uh, you know, in terms of how did this happen? How could government let it happen? Again, uh, look, there is nobody, no, there cannot be anybody who would not regret what is happening there. I mean, what's happened there is truly tragic, and it is tragic because of the close intermingling of communities, which has then led to created this degree of violence, which becomes very difficult really to head off. I think the entire wishes of the country are very much with Manipur. I mean, people would like to see normalcy return. They would like to see law and order get back. They will, this is not this is not the India that, and certainly not the Northeast, which anybody is hoping for. On the carbon neutral, because I saved that last question, that question for the last, the political science question. The carbon neutral, this carbon tax, we think it's very unfair, that this is a way actually of putting a barrier on trade by using a certain criteria. We've already made it clear that we would find ways of responding to it. But one part of it is how to protect our trade. But there is the other part, which is that we also have to decarbonize in our own interest. So there are a lot of efforts underway here. I think very much one part of it is, of course, you can see that renewables have grown tremendously in India. But again, in India we have a range of issues. There are cities where pollution levels are very high. There are issues with mass there is inadequate mass transport in certain places. So it's something which is I would say, because we have a commitment like everybody else for a net zero. Ours is in 2070. So I would say, when we are looking the next 5 years, 10 years ahead, how to grow greener and cleaner. Just growing. Till now the emphasis was on growth, but I think people now realize, and Prime Minister actually has been telling us this for some time, that it's not enough to grow, that you have to from the beginning grow cleaner and greener, because we don't want to then decarbonize down the path. And that is really part of the technology today challenges that we face, that when we look at a technology upgrade today, how do you acquire those technologies, how do you generate those technologies, how do you deploy those technologies? So it is very much part of a sort of national thinking. So the last question जो आपका आखिर वाला सवाल था कि आप राजनीति में हैं और इतने 4-5 साल के बाद भी तमीज से बात करते हैं, ये आपका सवाल था. तो देखिए ऐसा है, ये आप राजनीति में बहुत माने, it's actually very interesting domain. मैंने ये देखा कि how you behave with people is how they behave with you. And in many cases, because अब राजनीति में many leaders there, अब उनमें से बहुत लोग होंगे जहाँ कहीं ना कहीं पहले, अब जब मैं कूटनीति में था, एम्बेसडर था, कहीं कोई दोस्त था, कोई गेस्ट था, somewhere we have looked after. I think many of us have been through that experience. अब आप राजनीति में आ गए, उसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि वो रिश्ते टूट गए. I mean, you keep up all of that. So I would say that generally, being good to people is actually a smart thing to do. It is, and I would also give it the other side. By and large, if you are very reasonable with people, आप अगर थोड़ा भी upset हो जाएं, people take it very seriously. उसका भी फायदा होता है. So, but I would, honestly say that for me, as I'm coming to the end of this term, it has been for me actually, usually at my age, people don't always have a chance to learn something new. So I'm very thankful for that opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your
I also request my colleagues on the left side of the room to close the doors so that we could have all your attention to this session. Thank you. Look, this session is essentially a conversation between five very smart people. I actually would take a step ahead and say it's between five think tankers. Dr. Jaishankar is not a foreign minister, he's actually a think tanker. And he's pretending to be a foreign minister. So I am now going to ask him to manifest his think tank hat here and get into a conversation with his colleagues on questions of world affairs. And I think there's lots to talk about in the world today. And the good news for all of you is that I will only ask one question through the entire morning. The rest of the questions are going to be amongst themselves. And I'm going to kick this off by actually posing a question to the foreign minister. Foreign minister, you are someone who's made foreign policy more relatable to people. You have used grammar, vocabulary, and even imagery that makes people, young people especially, become more interested in some very complex and complicated discussions that are underway. People feel involved in foreign policy today. Most recently, your book, Why Bharat Matters, has dived deep into some of our oldest stories as children growing up in this country to make complex contemporary questions more interesting for them. But for a foreign policy audience, what are the big takeaways from your book? From your recent book, what are your 4 or 5 big takeaways for the world we live in today?
Okay. Clearly, you're taking the think tank bit seriously. What are the takeaways? One, I think the really serious problems are stemming from the economic vulnerabilities of the world. My case is for re-globalization, where supply chains, where concentrations, where digital vulnerabilities are better addressed. And I push that because we are really focused much more on the obvious challenges, the war in Ukraine, the what's happening in Gaza, the COVID. So my point is the economic fragilities, the economic dependencies are actually the really serious threat to the world. The second point would be that in a way, the beware of the normal. We tend to focus on the exceptional situations, but actually there's a daily, erosion or a daily danger or a daily insecurity created by the normal. So watch where the normal is going, because every day in our lives, we are doing things which expose us more and more, particularly in a technology-dependent world. The third relates to the mind games. So, competition has many forms, but one of them are the mind games which accompany. It's like any competitive activity. So, all these indexes which you get, ratings, how democratic are you, how good's your press, how good's your civil rights. So this is like the equivalent of sledging in cricket. It's meant to psych you before you get ready for doing anything. So I'm saying that particularly looking at Michael.
No, but in the political sphere, the Americans are the biggest sledgers, not the Australians.
Well, that we can discuss on a cricket aside.
Okay.
And the fourth, which is part of the reason for the title of the book, is we in India need to think the solutions. In fact, frankly, even the analysis for ourselves, rather than kind of, I'm not against imparted wisdom, but I think we need delving into our own history, traditions, culture, and our own application of mind, come up with our own answers to the world.
So, Dr. Jaishankar, we are going to keep coming back to you because they are going to be asking you some questions. And I would expect you to pose some cryptic puzzles for them to solve as well. So let me get this going, and let me first start with Michael Pulilove, who's heading a very nifty institute in Sydney, Lowy Institute. Michael, you have the first shot.
All right. First of all, I want to take the opportunity to thank Samir and ORF for bringing us all together at this amazing bazaar of international policy. I'm really enjoying it. I'm honored to be on a panel with this panel, but especially with Dr. Jaishankar. We've known each other for a long time. We've had many exchanges on cricket and foreign policy. Let me take this opportunity to wish India luck in the 4th test against England. I think that's one thing on which Australia and India agree. That is, we like to see England lose cricket matches. I also like the analogy between cricket and foreign policy because in cricket, Australia is a great power. Let me come to great power competition because that's what I want to ask you about. Great power competition has come roaring back over the past decade. Geopolitics is back. At the same time, wealth and power have moved eastwards towards our part of the world. And China's growth has comprised the largest element of that. There's a massive concentration of wealth in China. And that same period, which has coincided with Xi Jinping's period in power, has also seen China become much more aggressive in the waters to its east and south, in its relations with its neighbours, notably India, also Australia. But in truth, China has been at daggers drawn with many of its neighbours at different times over the past decade. And I would argue that the severity of China's behaviour has seen a few effects in our part of the world. First of all, other Asian countries seeking to step up and expand their freedom of movement and to make new friends, do things in different ways, because none of us wants to live in China's shadow. Secondly, institutional developments. For example, the elevation of the Quad. I would say both the Quad and AUKUS were made in China, Minister. And finally, connections between capable Asian countries like India and Australia getting stronger. So there's the context. Now, let me ask you 2 questions about China, because I think China is at the heart of a lot of this strategic flux. First of all, let me ask you about relations between China and India. You told us at the inaugural session that we should listen, like Mr. Modi, the importance of listening and reflecting. I've listened during this conference. I heard the Indian Defence Secretary say that China was a bully. I heard you say, I think, that the biggest opposer of UN Security Council reform is not a Western country, which I guess might possibly refer to China. China, I think, is a preoccupation of yours. What is the settling point of the relationship between China and India? is there a settling point? And secondly, let me ask you about the relationship between China and Russia. The Ukraine war has pushed China and Russia together. It seems to me there's a lot of confidence here in India that eventually they will pull apart again because they're different countries with different interests. But I wonder if there's some overconfidence there. Mr. Putin is on his high horse at the moment, but I think in the long term, he understands that Russia is the junior partner in that relationship. China's economy is closing on America's economy. Meanwhile, Russia is in danger of being overtaken by Australia's economy.
Michael,
What
two
if,
questions at
let
a
me
time.
finish. What if the China-Russia relationship strengthens? What if it doesn't turn out in the way that India hopes?
Okay, you just introduced a thought in my head, which is people say that the Quad is directed against somebody. And it struck me that, yes, all four of us have had problems with the UK. So think about it. But three of us have actually kind of fought a war. Yeah. But more seriously, where, what would be the, where would India, China finally find a equilibrium or a balance? It will, here's the problem. Both of us are rising, obviously at a different pace with different starting points. I think the Chinese started off earlier, much more, much more intensively and robustly than we did. But it's in the nature of things that, at some stage everybody flattens out. So there'll be a period where they'll be flattening out and we'll be growing. I'm not in denial of, what the numbers today suggest. But if one looks, for example, at the Goldman Sachs prediction, which is that we'll both really, by about 2075, end up as $50 trillion economy plus, and will be the two closest to each other. Now, the international relations version of that issue would be, if both of us are moving vis-a-vis each other and vis-a-vis the world, how do we construct an equilibrium? That there will be occasions when one or the other would want to change, to do something to press home a particular advantage, and the other will resist it. Here's the immediate issue, which is, from the 1980s, really, late 80s, we had an understanding on the border, precisely because it suited both of us. Now, there was a departure after after 30 years, a departure on their side in terms of how they behaved on the border. And there's a pushback from our side. So I think management, arriving at equilibriums, then maintaining those, refreshing those, is going to be one of the biggest challenges for both countries. It's not going to be easy. The bit which, the mind games which will be played would be, it's just between the two of us. There's nobody, the other 190 odd countries in the world don't exist in our relationship. That will be the mind game which will be played. I don't think we should play it. Because if there are other factors out there in the world which can be harnessed by me to get better terms on an equilibrium, why should I forego that right? So part of, today, when I say think through your own solutions, is don't give another country, which is clearly a competitive country, a veto over our policy choices. And unfortunately, in the past, that has happened from time to time. So we should be confident enough to leverage the international system to create the best possible outcome. Your second issue, Russia, China. it's kind of funny. On the one hand, you have people whose sets of policies bring the two together. And then you say, beware of them coming together. So, okay, I mean, I can see the reality out there, but I think it's very much in, certainly in Indian national interest, but I would suggest actually in global interest, that when Russia, what's happened today with Russia is essentially a lot of doors have been shut to Russia and the West. Okay, we know the reasons why. Russia is turning more to Asia or to parts of the world which are not West. Now, I think it makes sense to give Russia multiple options. If we railroad Russia into a single option and say, that's really bad because that's the outcome, then you are making it a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So today, I think it's important for other countries, especially in Asia, to engage Russia, to remind Russia. And look, Russia is a power with an enormous tradition of statecraft. Such powers would never put themselves, into a single relationship of a overwhelming nature. It would go against their grain.
Yeah, so you have a right to ask him a question as well, but maybe you could pose a question once we've been through the first round, and maybe one or two for all of them to respond to. Leslie, can I turn to you? Or maybe I should go to my friend from Nigeria, Osage. Can you pose a question to the foreign minister? Osage heads the Nigerian Institute of Foreign Affairs. He was with me recently in New York. I really enjoyed his interventions. Over to you.
And we're just together, Your Excellency. Let me thank the ORF and the Ministry of External Affairs for this invitation. It's a great privilege to be here. And I'm happy that we can continue the conversation that you set in motion in Lagos when you were at our institute 2 weeks ago. Now, the point is about multilateralism and the place of the UN, and especially United Security Council in all the things. These are inflection points in world history when perhaps we need world bodies, world platforms that can help us create the kinds of stability that the world so very urgently requires. Now, this month, it will be 2 years since the war in Ukraine started. And the UN doesn't seem to be any closer to finding a solution in spite of all that we're doing. And what seems to be happening in all the subjects that we're dealing with is that people are now finding alternatives to the UN. And yet here we are, we insist that the UN holds the balance, if you like, for all the kinds of things that we're doing. The UN itself is a reflection of the power structure, of the global power structure, which resonates all of the colonialities and the colonial forms and so on. So there's a school of thought that says when you ask for UN reforms, you're actually in the vortex of decolonization. Now it's interesting that India, has pushed along these lines, and the African Union is fully, in support of what India is doing. Now, the UN reforms, what do you want to see? Inclusivity is important, representation is important, but so is legitimacy and credibility. Now that the UN seems to be winning in its influence, what is driving India's point about how to reform the UN? Now that's one. The second thing is, in a reformed UN, how would we ensure that the Global South, stops being a spectator? So the Global South is not simply led, by others whose interests subordinate the interests of the Global South. Is this something to suggest that you would have a multi-track that has the UN, along with BRICS, along with all the other regional organizations and all the other multilateral platforms working together, or should we continue to balance things around the UN?
Dr. Jaishankar.
It's interesting thought, and it's your thought, which I'm capturing here. I think all of you heard him say that reform of UN is actually connected to decolonization. And what I guess you mean by that is so long as Africa and Latin America and parts of the decolonized Asia are not adequately and appropriately reflected, the UN is still actually a reflection of a colonial era organization. So I think it's a great idea. I really think that posing the reform issue in terms of perpetuating a colonial era is something which we all need to think about. But on the UN reform itself, there's actually been progress. It was interesting. I think you had a pre-panel
Yes.
of, there's a IGN process, the Intergovernmental Negotiation process. The chairs of that are Kuwait and Austria. And the chairs were visiting India. They participated in a panel before this conference.
It was a curtain raiser, actually.
Formally began. And what is happening right now is we have finally moved the needle to a point where different models of how to reform the UN are being presented before the UN. So there's a Mexico model. There's a Liechtenstein model. I don't know if the foreign minister of Liechtenstein is here in the audience. She was here at the conference yesterday. I spoke to her. There's an L69 model, of which India is also part, which is largely a global south view. I think Nigeria is also part of it. The G4 will give theirs. Africa will present it. So actually, finally, we've reached a point where very specific views of the key elements of reform, that's being that's being heard in a way. Now, we'll have to see, okay, after you hear everybody out, what's the next step? Where do you go? That's not clear as yet. But we certainly, we have a strong view about the need for reform. We will put those views forward. When you have 200 odd members, it makes sense that the body will hear everybody out and we will come to some kind of middle ground. I mean, that's what diplomacy and negotiations are about. But again, there's a very clever mind game being played, which is, how can we reform the body unless we have consensus? That's like saying, how can I take the exam because I don't know the result? So this is another way of perpetuating what you clearly pointed out was a sort of a colonized United Nations.
In fact, the UN process is perhaps the only process where you need a consensus before you can make the first draft. The draft itself requires a consensus. So it's interesting. Leslie, let me turn to you.
First of all, let me echo Michael's words and others. First of all, thank you to Samir. This is tremendous, and it's a real honor to be here, and it's especially an honor to be on a panel with you, Dr. Jaishankar. I want to ask a question about the G20. I was very lucky and fortunate. Samir gave me the opportunity to be a member of the Think 20 Task Force 7 on Reformed Multilateralism, and for me, it was a year of coming to India on multiple occasions, to different parts of India, to listen to a really diverse set of voices, not only from India, but from all of the participants from the multiple countries who engaged in that. But I also got to listen to you and many of the things that you said. And in Mysuru at the final Think 20 summit, you always have very good lines. I think we all listen to you and follow you in part for those. But one of the things a couple of the things you said. One was the G7, and you paused. It is important, but the world has moved on, and it's really the G20 that shows us the breadth and diversity and the diverse power, of course, although you don't use the word power, of the world. And so the G20 is tremendously important. But you also said that and this reflected my experience watching it. You said that that India's G20 was about two things. It was about getting India ready for the world, and it was about getting the world ready for India. And I thought this was tremendously revealing of actually the year that I had experienced. But I guess my question for you is, as you think ahead, there's been as Samir always says, there's been a wonderful run of Global South leadership of the G20 from Indonesia to India to Brazil to South Africa. But as we look at 2026, the picture looks different. It goes to the United States. So when we get to 2026, the UN Security Council probably won't have been reformed.
No, are you suggesting by 2026 the US will be Global South?
I do believe, Samir, having not grown up in New York or Washington, that there are parts of the Global South within the United States, and I encourage you to find them. I've traveled around India. Let's take you around the US. But as you get to 2026, India is currently the 5th largest economy. My SOAS students from India were thrilled in that moment because we were in the classroom when that was announced. The 3rd largest military